This show is produced by the Hartman Media Company. For more information and links to all our great podcasts, visit hartmanmedia.com.
Number one, I love your show. I love, the way that you go deep into business and then go, on some of these other tangents of experiences that as business people we all have. So thank you for putting out such good content because it's impactful. It is really impactful.
Welcome to the Creating Wealth Show with Jason Hartman. You're about to learn a new slant on investing, some exciting techniques, and fresh new approaches to the world's most historically proven asset class that will enable you to create more wealth and freedom than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine self-made multimillionaire who's actually been there and done it. He's a successful investor, lender, developer, and entrepreneur who's owned properties in 11 states, had hundreds of tenants, and been involved in thousands of real estate transactions. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to your financial independence day. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
Today is today. And yesterday was today yesterday. Tomorrow will be today tomorrow. So live today, so the future today will be as the past today, as it is tomorrow.
Greetings from Greece and welcome to episode 2185. For those of you watching on video, tell me where I am. Comment below and guess. I told you the country. You did a pretty incredible job when I was in Germany guessing what city I was in. So here is a view. You're going to guess this in a minute, aren't you? Yes, you are. I'm on a cruise ship. Give you the scene again right there. Yep. You probably guessed it already. Okay, anyway, let's get on with the show. So today's episode is obviously brought to you by Kamala Harris, a person who could actually be president of the United States. What a total fucking joke. I mean, can you imagine? Oh my God. It's crazy. Crazy world we live in. But anyway, I am on a cruise ship here, and since we have had so much absolutely crazy news this past week with the assassination attempt and all of the conspiracy theories, and I got to tell you something. You've heard me say it many, many times that a conspiracy is nothing more than two people planning something. There are conspiracies going on all around us all the time. Right now, at this very moment, your friends are conspiring, not necessarily even against you, maybe for you. Could be for or against you. America was a conspiracy against the British Crown. Lots of people are conspiring. Hey, as the New Age people like to say, the universe is conspiring in your favor. The universe is conspiring in your favor. And yes, it is, especially if you're a real estate investor. Certainly the powers that be who create inflation and run the monetary and fiscal systems of the country and of the entire world, they are definitely conspiring in your favor if you are investing in the most historically proven asset class in the entire world, that is income property. But look, I don't want to go on too many tangents. Since we have so many crazy things going on in the world, I figured it was good to get to more interviews with Ivor Cummins today, because we have got to talk more about the way all of this sort of plumbing works in the background. All of these folks that are looking to gain more and more power at our expense. But you know what? We're so good at this as income property investors. We have learned how to game the system so that we are benefiting from their game. We are benefiting from their game. All right, let's get to Ivor Cummins and let's talk about more details, adding to the interviews we did a couple of weeks ago. In light of everything that's going on in the world, I think this is a very fitting time to consider this. Now, also, we have a Wednesday Zoom meeting coming up, as we do the second Wednesday of every month. be sure to register for that. I don't even know if the landing page is up yet, but this is going to be another good one, and it's always at jasonhartman.com/Wednesday. If that big CrowdStrike computer virus hasn't ruined your internet connection or ours or whatever, I am noticing some real problems with some of the software that I deal with. Are you noticing that too? Tell me how CrowdStrike affected you by commenting below if you are watching on a video platform. All right, thanks for that, and let's get to our continuing discussion with Ivor Cummins. It is my pleasure to welcome Ivor Cummins back to the show as we discuss the elite class, their power grab, a little bit of history recap on where they've come from, why they're here, what they're doing, and most importantly, action steps that you can take and all of us can take to help preserve our freedoms and liberties. Ivor, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Jason. And we'll keep the pace fast today to get the rest of the story squished into the time.
Right. There is a lot to cover here. Everybody needs to understand there is a lot to cover. We are going to put a link in the show notes for more details on this topic and some free video content that will expand, if you want to take a deeper dive into this, that will expand on it a lot more of Ivor's presentations. So there will be a link for that in the show notes. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Okay, great stuff. Well, I'm just sharing again now. So yeah, we were at the point where we talked about, of course, the Rockefeller Brothers Fund, Kissinger, League of Nations, Council of Foreign Relations, and all these big, powerful organizations who are connected into the State Department and kind of CIA, and they're moving to a world government. And a big part of that we mentioned was the founding of the World Economic Forum with Klaus Schwab, who's Rockefeller's boy. But I was just stepping more to the current present because the World Economic Forum, under a different name, was created in 1971. But just jumping forward to 19, we see the trustees. So who's really the big funding trustees? And we see all the banks up the top, including Sberbank of Russia. They're still in there in spite of the current challenges. And we have the Bank for International Settlements, the central bank of central banks. So the banks are a huge part. They're bought into this whole new world government structure. And we see the usual suspects, Rockefeller, Council of Foreign Relations, and climate groups, OECD, people will be familiar with, and Carlyle, and BlackRock. So this is the groups who are really the trustees of the World Economic Forum. And here's some more personal trustees. Ursula von der Leyen, the EU Commission, big problem. It's basically communist system applied in the West. That's really what the EU is, and the Commission is unelected. So terrible things are happening. And we've Christine Lagarde in the European Central Bank. Again, these people who are connected to WEF, they're in position of powers everywhere. And Al Gore, that turkey, who's been 100% wrong on everything he said on climate for 40 years, but got very rich on the back of it, he's in there as well. So these kind of characters are all in there. And I'm just showing now on the screen, Larry Fink of BlackRock, of course, is a trustee, and Rubenstein of the Carlyle Group. So just very heavy hitters are all on board. And that's why World Economic Forum strategies that are, quite frankly, absurd to the ordinary person, that's why they're so successfully manifested in our world, because there's a massive amount of money and powerful influence that's sitting on the trustee board behind them. So that's why when people are confused, how is this nonsense that we see happening all over the world in lockstep? Yeah. Well, because it's very well managed. So no conspiracy theory.
Right. So absolutely.
Yeah, it's just corporate manipulation and power play at a much higher level than most of us would have been prior used to. That's all. Right. So really quickly with the story, much quicker than I usually do it. Stockholm conference, we have Morris Strong, who is Rockefeller's boy, big oil billionaire. They always are. And he's banging on about climate. And he was brought into the UN. All doors were opened. And within no time, he was head of the UN Climate Emergency effectively department. And Only One Earth, written by Barbara Ward, who was one of the founders of World Economic Forum, of course, that got very popular and talked about the earth will collapse with overpopulation and, oh my God, we're all going to die.
I mean, this was going on 250 years ago with Malthus and yes. the complete opposite happened. Again, I want to encourage everybody to read that book, The Bet, which is about Ehrlich and Simon and their big debate over the decades. And look who won, right? The earth is a truly abundant place that can support a lot more people.
Yeah, and if you put our 8 billion in a 1 meter square each, I think in a small part of Texas, you'd fit all the people in the world. Now, they all need to, of course, get food and water and all the rest, but it just illustrates, people think 8 billion, oh my God, the planet is just infested with humans. But to be honest, the planet is huge and the resources are huge. So absolutely.
And not to mention that humans create resources and clean problems up and solve problems. Can you imagine all of the people that are either infants now or not yet born that will solve the world's problems in the future? Yeah, I mean, there's a reason in a corporation they call a department human resources, because humans are resources. They are natural resources. They're our best natural resource.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the Rockefellers and the head of IBM and all the Gates, they're all part of Planned Parenthood. And in fairness, they have been extremely successful with all their strategies over the last half century in the West to collapse the birth rates. Yeah. So to be honest, we're going to get the population leveling off anyway. Even if you didn't need it, it's going to happen anyway. Yep. And like you said, it's all fine. But these guys need to say it's not fine because they have not yet got world government. Therefore, there needs to be terror. And I just shown on the screen now the Club of Rome, and very quickly, they were 1970 approx. Aurelio Picci set it up. He was the head of Fiat in Italy, very rich man. They had a new book, The Limits to Growth, which basically they ran some kind of a junk Fortran program, complete nonsense like Neil Ferguson's modeling. And it showed that if the population continues, the world will collapse, right? So that became very popular too. It captured imagination. And Giovanni Agnelli funded it, but he was buddies with David Rockefeller and in Chase Manhattan Bank. And basically, it's always the same guys. So you don't need to be a conspiracy theorist to attach to this, because the published history just shows you, to anyone with a brain, it's always the same guys in organizations, and they're always scamming because they desperately want a world government. And they've done well so far. They've done well. So really quickly, I'm just showing on the screen the first global revolution from the Club of Rome, which is a Rockefeller organ, of course. And with the red and black letters, they're actually almost laughing at us because it's fascist, communist, even in appearance.
They even have the color scheme and the typeface and that sort of flare in the background. It looks very Soviet.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah. You remember the Soviet, this huge worker with the big muscly arm and these
right. I like that fist. I like that sign. I've thought about using that in one of my logos, actually.
Absolutely. I mean, it seems to work with the masses. But they say themselves in this book, this was 91, and they actually admit themselves when they were searching for a common enemy or a hobgoblin to convince people to get behind them, they mused on that and they wrote that the threat of global warming would fit the bill. Their words. And we know what that means. It means, this would fit the bill. In other words, global warming is nonsense, but it'll fit the bill. It will work. People will believe it. And they did. And they said also in that book, the real enemy now, we declare, is humanity itself. So you can see how cleverly they turned it. They said, all you little ants, right, in the ant, you're going to be in our ant farm. But to get you there, we're telling you you're the enemy of the planet.
You know what's interesting about that? First of all, let's take the global warming issue, right? There are so many layers to that onion that need to be peeled back. The first layer is, of course, is it happening? The second layer is, what is the cause? What can we do about it? I mean, there are a lot of layers to that. But the scary thing is when they say humans are the enemy, right? It's odd that nobody in the environmental movement is recommending mass suicide. Like, why aren't these people taking their own lives? If they want to do the earth a favor, I mean, I guess the first thing they can do is just disappear and stop consuming and stop polluting, right? They just think everybody else should be gone except them. It proves what elitist they are. They are just elitist. You could argue they're genocidal dictators. I mean, that's really what they're recommending.
Yeah. Or a helpful way of looking at it is just think of cults. They are running a cult scam. And of course, the cult leader has 20 Mercedes while all the people are living in little dormitories and, basically eating next to nothing. They're running a cult. And that's why all the big influencers in climate, they go in private jets to Davos and talk about it. But yes, the ants will have to do all the work and they will preside over it as the elite overlords. And people still don't seem to see it like that.
Well, we're the useful idiots, right?
Yeah, there you are. What Carlin said, it's a big club and we ain't in it. Yeah. But I think the people are waking up, and we'll get to that in the end if we move quite quickly. So I'm going to fly through these next slides. Absolutely. So then we had, after the World Problematique, or the Club of Rome, we have Davos Manifesto in 73. That's the whole Davos WEF thing. And then we have Trilateral Commission, get together with Rockefeller. And their magazine, the Trilateral Commission, was Foreign Affairs. And we have Richard N. Gardner, who's a Rockefeller insider. And he did a big article. And it's basically the hard road to New World Order. So they're actually writing all this down. It's just the media are well controlled, the mass media, and they don't cover this. It's just for the insiders. And the other interesting thing is that the Rockefellers and all these elites, they love futuristic nonsense because it's a great thing to help with their narrative. Gives their narrative a bit of storyline. So Nelson Rockefeller got in and backed the World Future Society, and they did a big report, the next 25 years, a crisis and opportunity. And they have this nutbar futurist, Warren Wagner. And basically, this whole thing is about, look, crises in the coming 25 years, whether real or imagined or promoted by us, are opportunities for us to progress world government. So it always goes back to the same thing. They just want to have kind of believable crises that the commoners will believe. And then they'll say, to resolve this crisis, you need us. Like every dictator or totalitarian leadership in history. They always use the same trick. So I'm just showing that next. 1987, they renamed the European Economic Forum into the World Economic Forum because they got a lot of traction. You see an older Maurice Strong there. Remember, he's Rockefeller's boy, big oil money, billionaire in the UN now, banging on about global warming and catastrophe. And I'm just showing a newspaper front page from 1972. And Maurice Strong, the UN Environment Protection boss, right? He says we have 10 years to stop the catastrophe, right? That's a huge headline. And
it's interesting that they keep moving the goalpost and keep pushing the timeline back. The catastrophe was supposed to be 250 years ago with Malthus. Then it was supposed to be, I'll skip a lot of time here, but it was certainly supposed to be in the 70s, right? Peak Oil, Soylent Green, the movie. Remember all these like dystopian movies and documentaries in the 70s? I mean, I do. And, it didn't happen in the 70s. Then the 80s, we had this optimistic decade under Reagan and Thatcher. That the catastrophe just never comes.
Well, but the fascinating thing is, Jason, and sadly, they're largely correct, with control of media, which by now they had a very strong control of media, they know they'll never be held to account on all the times they're proven to be liars. Oh. So they actually go ahead and keep pouring out terror, and they know they'll never be held to account. So he said 10 years to stop the catastrophe. 10 years came, 10 more years, 10 more years, 10 more years, 10 more years, and a half of another 10 years, and there's zero catastrophe. So the temperature has gone up naturally around a half a degree in the last half century, and everything's gotten better because a degree or two extra makes the world much better to live on average.
You know what? That's another interesting point I should have made earlier about the global warming scare tactics. We have to ask ourselves, really in this order, is it happening? Number one. Number two, is it bad? I mean, think of all the non-arable areas of Earth now because it's too cold, right? Yeah. So there are benefits to global warming. I mean, I have read numerous articles on this. Numerous new species can survive and thrive in warmer climates. Crops can be grown. There are all sorts of benefits to it. And, you really have to look at this. I mean, we only hear the negative side, if it's actually happening at all. And then is it bad? And then what is the cause? And then what should be done, right? But, you have to ask, is it necessarily bad? I mean, many years ago, when there was an ice age, I'm sure there were species that did not survive when things changed and it got warmer, right? And some that thrived, I mean, there are always goods and bads of everything that happens.
Yeah. Well, it's hilariously one-sided here. That's an excellent point, Jason. But the reality is the Dark Ages were a cold period. And by the way, is it happening? Well, there's always changes in the average temperature, and they're natural, overwhelmingly. So that's the first question. Second question is this bad? Well, it's only bad when it gets colder. I mean, it's that one-sided. So the Dark Ages were a cold period. It was miserable. And then you had the medieval warm period, and you had an explosion of art, and you were growing vines in England, and everything was better. And then when you got the cold period after that, a couple of 100 years later, everything got pretty grim again. And then it got warm again, and everything got better. So it's always better when it's warmer. Like, it's not even like a kind of a trade-off. It always is. And NASA published a few years ago, and they effectively had to suppress the publication. They said, you know what? Whatever about the temperature changing slightly with all the CO2 we're putting back in the atmosphere, we're going from 200 parts per million, which is nothing, to 400 parts per million now, which is still tiny, because it used to be 2,000 back in very beautiful periods of the Earth's history. But with this extra CO2 we're putting in, right, that's a fact, the planet is greening. There's de-desertification around the planet. So NASA made the mistake of admitting the truth that, wow, the bit of CO2 we're putting in, right, it doesn't really affect temperature because we know that, but they said, wow, it's greening the planet. Isn't this great?
Exactly. So, basically what the anti-people movement is saying is that we don't want to let the plants breathe.
Yeah.
Right? The more CO2 we have, the more the plants have to breathe. I mean, it's called a greenhouse gas, right? This is good for the greening of the earth. It's just, these arguments are so nonsensical. It's just amazing.
They are, but unfortunately, these guys running this kind of shit show or whatever, they are smart and they know it's nonsense. Just Morris Strong, of course, and the Rockefellers, they created the concepts of global warming as a hobgoblin to get world government. So they know it's nonsense. But they also know that if you keep control of the media and you get a mass formation going, get everyone scared, you can get away with any amount of lies. And, just moving on to the next slide, the next step was the UN, which is a Rockefeller organ, effectively. Rockefeller gave the buildings and land in New York to set up the UN in 1946, and they saw it as the future world government kind of infrastructure. So the UN is utterly corrupted from the start, but they had Our Common Future in 1987. And you have Morris Strong, again, big oil guy, right? Harlem Brundtland Commission, right? And she's Statoil and I think Dutch oil, trilateral commissions up to their neck in this, Club of Rome, the elites, super rich guys, climate disaster club, and you have Petro-Canada, that's Morris Strong. So big oil and big elites are 100% what's driving these global warming catastrophe big commissions. That's it. It all comes from the bad guys. It was later they funded scientists and academics to get on the wagon, but that came later. And Rockefeller specifically gave the funding for this common future on the stipulation it had to talk about climate change disaster. They did not want it talking about pollution from corporates and environmental pollution. They didn't want to go there, of course. They wanted to talk about climate change disaster.
Well, what they want to do is they want to distract everybody from the corporations that are benefiting from their pollution, and they want to blame all of us. Right?
Yes.
They want it to be our fault. So we will feel so bad about ourselves and so self-loathing that their goal is to just exterminate and just reduce the population. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. And I think their main goal is not so much mass death or mass starvation. I don't really go for those kinds of things because I haven't found the historical proof. And I always stick to the actual documented kind of proof, because if you go outside of that, you can get caught out being wrong. But I think they're going to get it because the population replacement is slowing right down.
Oh, yeah.
And they create more wars and more chaos and more trans and more LGBTQ plus 17, XYW. All of those cultural things they're putting in means people just won't have kids. And it's happening for decades.
That's true. But, it really, you can go back to 1990, and I kind of call 1990, at least culturally, the peak of civilization, right? It's been downhill ever since then. And there was this huge movement to make people less attractive. The body positivity, the Seattle grunge movement, the hip hop and the rap music, which just was, in the 80s, the whole idea was to be a winner, to be successful, to be good looking, to be in good physical shape, to be health conscious. And then around 1990, with those things I just mentioned, it was like everybody should get fat, wear sweatpants, women shouldn't wear makeup. It was the whole idea was to make people not attracted to each other. And sure enough, it worked because, the birth rate just has plummeted and we are facing a demographic cliff. Now, it takes a long time for this to play out, but around 2050, folks, we really do start seeing some significant signs of demographic cliff, even in the 2040s. So it's a problem.
It's a problem, but we'll see very shortly. They've got loads of strategies and they all move towards the big goal. But the person in the street, it's very hard for them to see all this kind of weirdness and connect it together. So we'll do that for people. But really fast in this slide, we had Agenda 21 in 1992. And basically, long story short, Morris Strong and all the rest of the elites, they got 155 countries' leaders into Rio de Janeiro, all about the Earth Summit, and in our hands was their slogan, their hands. Yep. And they got 155 leaders to sign up to Agenda 21, which is quite horrific nonsense.
And we talked about that last time, Agenda 21. Let's corral the people into small cities so that they can be more dependent on the system and more easily controlled.
Absolutely. And it's always the same, but they use nice language. They have good script writers. So they make it sound like they're saving Granny and saving the bears, all this stuff. It's nothing to do with that, of course. And then the Earth Charter Commission in 92, you had Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands in there and Queen Beatrix, his daughter. Well, Prince Bernhard founded Bilderberg. Right. So always the same people. They had Gorbachev in, Nelson Rockefeller led it. They were bringing Stephen Rockefeller, his son, up into their ranks because they know this stuff will only be achieved after their death. They're long gamers. So they bring in their sons and new people. It's beyond their own lifetime, these visions. And we have Strong in there. And then the great transition led by Stephen Rockefeller, the new elite boy, Nelson's son, and the Earth Charter Commission, plus 15, all funded by Rockefeller, funded by Rockefeller's UN. Always the same stuff. And the next thing I switched on the slides is a reminder, the Global Leaders Initiative, Young Global Leaders, set up by World Economic Forum, started in 1993. And they realized we're going to need leaders in every country who are our property, our boys. So they started bringing in, Bill Gates was one of the first, but they had Ardern came in, our Prime Minister, Leo Varadkar, Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, Barroso, the EU Commission, Sarkozy for France, Angela Merkel. I could go on all day. They even had Leonardo DiCaprio because they saw him as a big influencer. But the long story short...
But he doesn't need to give up his 412-foot yacht, let me guess.
No, the beauty is, not only do you not have to give up anything, including jets, you are guaranteed future positions and protection. That is understood. All you have to do is achieve our vision. But they've done 4,000 of these young global leaders through the program. 4,000. I only mentioned some names. So now you see where the lockstep happens when the likes of COVID happens. Because they have 4,000 young global leaders all out there. They're all in place. So I'm going to skip the next bit, but they had an initiative in 2005, which they called the 2020 Initiative. Surprise, surprise. And they got all their global leaders and they talked to them about pandemics in the future and misinformation and how we would need to run it as future leaders. They told them what they would have to do. Yep. So when the pandemic hit, all these leaders were in place and they realized, hey, we brainstormed all this back in 2005. This is it, the pandemic, the misinformation. Right. Yep. We know what to do. So they're like Pavlov's dogs.
And they, look, they tried to get that off the ground earlier with swine flu, bird flu, mad cow. Those just never took like COVID did. COVID really worked.
Yeah. Well, they had the preparation. So I interviewed a great man, Dr. Wolfgang Wodarg, and he was the hero of swine flu because he used the EU Commission and I think the Parliament there to raise that swine flu was a nothing burger and it was a pharma scam. And they redefined kind of pandemic itself, and they took out the severity clause. So it no longer needed to be causing massive death everywhere. They said, let's change the definition of pandemic and let's just have it be a new virus that's in a few regions. And that's it, even if it's not causing any major harm. So he highlighted that around 300 news outlets around the world covered it, and the whole swine flu scam collapsed. But they learned from that, and in the following 11 years, they bought up a lot more media.
Wow.
So they learn. They're smart and they learn. So that's why COVID was so well managed, because they had all the global leaders and they now had huge donations to the main media organizations. And that's why all the media basically got lockstep too. Yeah. They were paid for it.
It was truly amazing how coordinated that was. I mean, I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers saw the videos of the news media, literally all these independent channels parroting the same lines, as if they sent the mass email to all of the media outlets with the script. This is the COVID script. It was just repeated ad nauseum. And then the celebrities that would, have tantrums on various talk shows about getting vaccinated and so forth. I mean, it was just truly unbelievable. One place that I found is interesting that doesn't seem to be very censored is Substack. Of course, X and Twitter, but there's all kinds of deep, documented, footnoted research on Substack about effects of the vax, and there's the died suddenly feed and so forth on Twitter and X and elsewhere, with deep academic research about the harms and the injuries caused by this. So it's it's all coming out now, and of course the hearings with Dr. F. I won't even say his name because the algorithm will pick it right up and censor me. But yeah.
I know it's in fairness, Musk's X pretty much free as far as I can see. I don't really see any problem with that now in Substack, but even LinkedIn and some of the others, they were horrific. I was knocked off for a year and a half and I didn't even reach their rules. Yeah. I mean, I did a funny 1-minute video showing clips of Tony Blair, and I kind of poked fun at him about his obsession with passports. That was it. That got me off LinkedIn for a year and a half. And it technically wasn't even making any claim on medical safety. It was just, taking a shot at Tony Blair. But someone picked up, the golden phone, and I was kicked off.
Right.
And that's how these guys work. They've got their channels. So fair enough. But if we go on to the next slide, 2006, we had the Global Risks Report from RAND Corporation, right? A military industrial complex corporation working with WEF. And they're going on about risks in 2020 onwards. And they're going on and on about flus. And they highlight the big risk. Apparently, this is 2006, will be misinformation. That, people will be talking misinformation and they'll make everyone panic even more. But I mean, they knew. They meant misinformation was people putting up their hand and saying, hold on a minute, this thing smells. And that will cause less panic because people will call it and say, hey, it's only a flu, guys. Yeah. But that's what they predicted would be a problem for them. They were the ones who they knew were going to massively exaggerate the effect and cause panic.
They saw that coming. God forbid people should talk, And I'll tell you something else. I'll just call it, 1/6, what happened here in the U.S., 1/6, the month and the date, okay? That's when everybody, at least everybody who has a brain, saw this massive mind control effort and what Orwell called, but how they basically just not revise history, obviously, but, put it into this black hole, right?
Oh, memory hole.
The memory hole. Thank you. For some reason, I couldn't think of that. Interestingly, do you know what came out, how bad this thought control, this mind control effort is? Literally, if you have documents, your own documents that you think are not being viewed on Google Drive or in Dropbox, those documents are now being read by their machines and censored. People have directly told me about disappearing documents from their Dropbox. I mean, that's just shocking because God forbid they would want you to be able to create evidence in Dropbox or Google Drive, share that link with people, and then people could be informed. You couldn't do it on Facebook or any social media platform, but there are other ways to share it. What are they going to do next? Go to all the printers in the world and say you can't print certain documents? I mean, it's just scary. This is what I said after 1/6. I said, this is the biggest problem facing humanity, is this revision of history.
Yeah, it is nuts. But I noticed in 2020, Dropbox I was using Dropbox, and a few documents disappeared.
Oh, that happened to you. That actually happened to you too.
And
wow.
I remember thinking...
Now I know another person it happened to.
Yeah, but I think on one of them, I got a little note where they actually seemed to acknowledge it, but then I never got an acknowledgement. They said, this is inappropriate or something. But I think they stopped that warning and they began to do it invisibly.
Yeah, they don't even tell you anymore. They just secretly delete things. And, who knows if that sharing link would even work, right? Maybe that's the way they deplatform you, is they essentially, you're being ghosted. Right? If the link won't work. And I'll give you another example of that. Vimeo. What a disgusting company Vimeo is. We use Vimeo just to share files in the background, not with the public usually, right? It's rarely with the public. Just in my own production process with my editors and so forth. We use Vimeo. And a video that they considered not fitting the narrative, multiple times Vimeo has sent me a notice, this video is going to be taken down. You can't even post it for yourself to store it there.
I know.
I mean, this is absolutely shocking. And that Apple, another disgusting company, they have a patent on a feature that they can turn on at any time on all iPhones that can shut off their ability to record video. So if you want to record a video of, say, the police doing something bad, they can shut off your video camera remotely. They did this in China, in Hong Kong with the protests there, where people could not use AirDrop because AirDrop, since it's peer-to-peer on the iPhone, was the only way for them to get around the CCP's censorship, where they could share files and share photos and share videos with one another via AirDrop. And Apple, is a pawn for the CCP. So they shut that feature off. Can you imagine the number of people who literally died, who got killed by the CCP or imprisoned because of Apple not allowing people to use AirDrop? They turned the feature off. I mean, these companies are just pure evil. It's unbelievable. And we'll be back with a lot more on this topic with this guest on our next episode. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.